Hello guys, presenting the very first story reading session and glad to read out a story by one of my favorite authors, Jeffery Deaver. Deaver is an international #1 best-selling author. His books are sold in 150 countries and have been translated into over 25 languages. This particular short story has been taken from his book Twisted, which featured 16 short stories and was published in 2003. The first story, Without Jonathan, is the one which I shall be reading out today. Hope all of you enjoy listening to this as much as I enjoyed reading it. So, without further ado, let's begin. Without Jonathan, Marisa Cooper turned her car onto Route 232, which would take her from Portsmouth to Green Harbour, 20 miles away, thinking this was the same road that she and Jonathan had taken to and from the mall 1,000 times, cutting back necessities, silly luxuries, and occasional treasures. The road near which they had found their dream house when they had moved to Maine 7 years ago. The road they had taken to go to their anniversary celebration last May. Tonight, though, all those memories led to one place: her life without Jonathan. The setting sun behind her, she steered through the lazy turns, hoping to lose those difficult but tenacious thoughts. Don't think about it. Look around you, she ordered herself. Look at the rugged scenery, the slabs of purple clouds hanging over the maple and oak leaves, some gold, some red as a heart. Look at the sunlight, a glowing ribbon draped along the dark belt of hemlock and pine. Look at the absent line of cows walking single file in their spontaneous day-end commute back to the barn. Look at the stately white spires of a small village, tucked 5 miles off the highway. And look at you, a 34-year-old woman in a sprightly silver Toyota, driving fast, driving towards a new life. A life without Jonathan. "20 minutes later, she came to Dannerville and braked for the first of the town's 2 stoplights. As her car idled, clutch in, she glanced to her right. Her heart did a little thud at what she saw. It was a store that sold boating and fishing gear. She has noticed in the windows an ad for some kind of marine engineering treatment. In this part of coastal Maine, you couldn't avoid boats. They were in tourist paintings and photos, on mugs, t-shirts and keychains. And of course, there were thousands of the real things everywhere. Vessels in the water, on trailers, in dry docks, sitting in front yards. The New England version of pickup trucks on blocks in the rural South. But what had struck her heart was that the boat pictured in the ad she was now looking at was a Chris Craft. A big one, maybe 36 or 38 feet. Just like Jonathan's boat. Nearly identical, in fact. The same colors, the same configuration. He had bought his 5 years ago, and though Marisa thought his interest in it would flag, like that of any boy with a new toy, he had proved her wrong and spent nearly every weekend on the vessel, cruising up and down the coast, fishing like an old cod deckhand. Her husband would bring home the best of his catch, which she would clean and cook up. Jonathan, she swallowed hard and inhaled slowly, to calm her pounding heart. A honk behind her. The stoplight had changed to green. She drove on, trying desperately to keep her mind from speculating about his death. The Chris-craft rocking unsteadily in the turbulent grey Atlantic. Jonathan overboard. His arms perhaps flailing madly, his panicked voice perhaps crying for help. "Oh, Jonathan!" Marisa cruised through Danville's second light and continued towards the coast. In front of her, she could see, in the last of the sunlight, the skirt of the Atlantic, all that cold, deadly water. The water responsible for life without Jonathan. Then she told herself, no, think about Dale instead. Dale O'Banion, the man she was about to have dinner with in Green Harbor, the first time she had been out with a man in a long while. She had met him through an ad in a magazine. They had spoken on the phone a few times, and after considerable waltzing around on both their parts, she had felt comfortable enough to suggest meeting in person. They had settled on the Fishery, a popular restaurant on the wharf. Dale had mentioned the Oceanside Cafe, which had better food, yes, but that was Jonathan's favorite place. She just couldn't meet Dale there. So, the Fishery it was. She thought back to their phone conversation last night. Dale had said to her, "I'm tall and pretty well built, little balding on top." "Okay, well," she replied nervously. "I'm 5'5", blonde, and I'll be wearing a purple dress." Thinking about those words now, thinking how that simple exchange typified single life, meeting people you'd met only over the phone. She had no problem with dating. In fact, she was looking forward to it. She had met her husband when he was just graduating from medical school and she was only 21. They'd gotten engaged almost immediately, and that had been the end of her social life as a single woman. But now she'd have some fun. She'd meet interesting men. She'd begin to enjoy sex again. Even if it was work at first, she'd try to just relax. She'd try not to be bitter. Try not to be too much of a widow. But even as she was thinking this, her thoughts went somewhere else. Would she ever actually fall in love again? The way she had once been so completely in love with Jonathan? And would anybody love her completely? At another red light, Marisa reached up and twisted the mirror towards her and glanced into it. The sun was now below the horizon and the light was dim. But she believed she passed the rearview mirror test with flying colors. Full lips, a wrinkleless face reminiscent of Michelle Pfeiffer's, well, in a poorly lit Toyota accessory at least, and a petite nose. Her body too was slim and pretty firm, and though she knew her boobs wouldn't land her on the cover of the latest Victoria's Secret catalogue, yet she had a feeling that in a pair of nice and tight jeans her butt would draw some serious attention, at least in Portsmouth, Maine it would. Hell yes, she told herself, she'd find a man who was just right for her. Somebody who would appreciate the cowgirl within her, the girl whose Texan grandfather had taught her to ride and shoot. Or maybe she'd find somebody who would love her academic side, her writing and poetry, and a love of teaching, which had been her job just after college. Or maybe somebody who could laugh with her at the movies, at sights on the sidewalk, at funny jokes and dumb ones. How she loved laughing, and how little of it she had done lately. Then Marisa Cooper thought, no, wait. She'd find a man who'd love everything about her. But then the tears started, and she pulled off the road quickly, surrendering to the sobs. No, no, no. She forced the images of her husband out of her mind. The cold water, the grey water. 5 minutes later, she had calmed down, wiped her eyes dry, reapplied makeup and lipstick. She drove into downtown Green Harbor and parked in a lot near the shops and restaurants, a half block from the wharf. A glance at the clock. It was just 6:30. Del O'Banion had told her that he'd be working until about 7 and would meet her at 7:30. She had come to town early to do some shopping, a little retail therapy. After that, she'd go to the restaurant to wait for Dale O'Banion. But then she wondered uneasily if it would be all right if she sat in the bar by herself and had a glass of wine. Then she said to herself sternly, "What the hell are you thinking? Of course it'll be all right." She could do anything she wanted. This was her night. Go on, girl. Get out there. Get started on your new life. Unlike upscale Green Harbor, 15 miles south, Yarmouth, Maine is largely a fishing and packing town, and as such is studded with shacks and bungalows whose occupants prefer transport like F-150s and Japanese half-tons. SUVs too, of course. But just outside of town is a cluster of nice houses set in the woods on a hillside overlooking the bay. The cars in these driveways are Lexuses and Acuras mostly, and the SUVs here sport leather interiors and GPS systems and not, unlike their downtown neighbors, rude bumper stickers or Jesus fish. The neighborhood even has a name, Cedar Estates. In his tan coveralls, Joseph Bingham now walked up the driveway of one of these houses, glancing at his watch. He double-checked the address to make sure he had the right house and then rang the bell. A moment later, a pretty woman in her late 30s opened the door. She was thin, her hair a little frizzy, and even through the screen door she smelled of alcohol. She wore skin-tight jeans and a white sweater. "Yeah?" "I'm with the cable company." He showed her the ID. "I have to reset your converter boxes." She blinked. "The TV?" "That's right." "They were working yesterday." She turned to look hazily at the grey glossy rectangle of the large set in her living room. "Wait, I was watching CNN earlier. It was fine." "Mum, you're only getting half the channels you're supposed to." "The whole neighborhood is. We have to reset them manually. Or I can reschedule if... No, it's okay. Don't want to miss the cops. Come on in." Joseph walked inside, felt her eyes on him. He got this a lot. His career wasn't the best in the world, and he wasn't classically good looking, but he was in great shape. He worked out every day, and he had been told he exuded some kind of masculine energy. Of course, he didn't know all about that. He just liked to think he had a lot of self-confidence. "You want a drink?" she asked. "Can't. On the job." "Sure?" "Yep." Joseph, in fact, wouldn't have minded a drink, but this wasn't the place for it. Besides, he was looking forward to a nice glass of spicy Pinot Noir after he finished here. It often surprised people that somebody in his line of work liked and knew about wines. "I'm Barbara." "Hi, Barbara." She led him through the house to each of the cable boxes, sipping her drink as she went. She was drinking straight bourbon, it seemed. You have kids? Joseph said, nodding at the picture of two young children on the table in the den. They're great, aren't they? If you like pests, she muttered. He clicked buttons on the cable box and stood up. Any others? Last box is in the bedroom, upstairs. I'll show you. Wait. She went off and refilled her glass, then joined him again. Barbara led him up the stairs and paused at the top of the landing. Again, she looked him over. Where are your kids tonight? He asked. The pests are at the bastards, she said, laughing sourly at her own joke. We're doing the joint custody thing, you know, my ex and me. So, you're all alone here in this big house? Yeah, pity, huh? Joseph didn't know if it was or not. She definitely didn't seem pitiful. So, he said, which room's the box in? They had stored in the hallway. Yeah, sure, follow me, she said, her voice low and seductive. In the bedroom, she sat on the unmade bed and sipped the drink. He found the cable box and pushed the on button of the set. It crackled to life. CNN was on. Could you try the remote? He said, looking around the room. Sure, Barbara said groggily. She turned away, and as soon as she did, Joseph came up behind her with the rope that he had just taken out from his pocket. He slipped it around her neck and twisted it tight, using a pencil for leverage. A brief scream was stifled as her throat closed up, and she tried desperately to escape, to turn, to scratch him with her nails. The liquor soaked the bedspread as the glass fell to the carpet and rolled against the wall. In a few minutes, she was dead. Joseph sat beside the body, catching his breath. Barbara had fought surprisingly hard. It had taken all his strength to keep her pinned down and let the garrote do its job. He pulled on latex gloves and wiped away whatever prints he had left in the room. Then he dragged Barbara's body off the bed and into the center of the room. He pulled her sweater off, undid the buttons of her jeans. But then he paused. Wait. What was his name supposed to be? Frowning, he thought back to his conversation last night. What had he called himself? Then he nodded. That's right. He had told Marisa Cooper his name was Dale O'Banion. A glance at the clock. Not even 7 p.m. Plenty of time to finish up here and get to Green Harbor, where she was waiting, and the bar had a decent Pinot Noir by the glass. He unzipped Barbara's jeans, then started tugging them down to her ankles. Marisa Cooper sat on a bench in a small deserted park, huddled against the cold wind that swept over the Green Harbor wharf. Through the evergreens swaying in the breeze, she was watching the couple lounging in the enclosed stern of the large boat tied up to the dock nearby. Like so many boat names, this one was a pun. Main Street. She had finished her shopping, buying some fun lingerie, wondering, even a little discouraged, if anyone else would ever see her wearing it, and had been on her way to the restaurant when the lights of the harbor and the gently rocking motion of this elegant boat caught her attention. Through the plastic windows on the rear deck of the main street, she saw this couple sipping champagne and sitting close together. A handsome pair. He was tall and in very good shape, plenty of salt and pepper hair, and she, blonde and pretty. They were laughing and talking, flirting like crazy, Then, finishing their champagne, they disappeared down the cabin. The teak door slammed shut. Thinking about the lingerie in the bag she carried, thinking about resuming dating, Marisa again pictured Dale O'Banion, wondered how this evening would go. A chill hit her, and she rose and went on to the restaurant. Sipping a glass of fine Chardonnay, sitting boldly at the bar by herself. Way to go, girl. Marisa let her thoughts shift to what she might do for work. She wasn't in a huge hurry. There was the insurance money, the savings accounts too. The house was nearly paid for. But it wasn't that she needed to work. It was that she wanted to. Teaching? Or maybe writing. Or maybe she could get a job for one of the local newspapers. Or she might even go to medical school. She remembered the times Jonathan would tell her about some of the things he was doing at the hospital, and she had understood them perfectly. Marisa had a very logical mind, and she had been a brilliant student. If she had gone into graduate school years ago, she could have gotten a full scholarship for her master's degree. More wine. Feeling sad, then feeling exhilarated. Her moods bobbed like orange buoys, marking the lobster traps sitting on the floor of the grey ocean. The deadly ocean. She thought again about the man she was waiting for in this romantic candlelit restaurant. A moment of panic. Should she call Dale and tell him that she just wasn't ready for this yet? Go home, have another wine, put on some Mozart, light a fire, be content with your own company? She began to lift her hand to signal the bartender for the check. But then, suddenly, a memory came to her. A memory from life before Jonathan. She remembered being a little girl, riding a pony beside her grandfather, who sat on his tall Appaloosa. She recalled watching the lean old man calmly draw a revolver and sight down on a rattlesnake that was coiled to strike at Marisa's Shetland. The sudden shot blew the snake into a bloody mess on the sand. He had worried that the girl would be upset, having witnessed the death. Up the trail they had dismounted. He had crouched beside her and told her not to feel bad, that he had had to shoot the snake. But it's all right, honey. His soul's on its way to heaven. She had frowned. What's the matter, dear? Her grandfather had asked. That's too bad, grandfather. I want him to go to hell. Marisa missed that tough little girl, and she knew that if she called Dale to cancel, she would have failed at something important. It would be like letting the snake bite her pony. No, Dale was the first step, an absolutely necessary step to getting on with her life without Jonathan. And then there he was, a good-looking, balding man. Great body too, she observed, in a dark suit. Beneath it, he wore a black t-shirt, not a white polyester shirt and stodgy tie you saw so often in this area. She waved, and he responded with a charming smile. He walked up to her. Marisa, I'm Dale. A firm grip. She gave him back one, equally firm. He sat next to her at the bar and ordered a glass of Pinot Noir, sniffed it with pleasure, then clinked his glass to hers. They sipped. I wasn't sure if you'd be late, she said. Sometimes it's hard to get off work when you want to. Another sniff of wine. I pretty much control my own hours, he said. They chatted for a few minutes and then went on to the hostess's stand. The woman showed them to the table he had reserved. A moment later, they were seated next to the window. Spotlights on the outside of the restaurant shone down into the grey water. The sight troubled her at first, thinking about Jonathan in the deadly ocean, but she forced her thoughts away and concentrated on Dale. They made some small talk. He was divorced and had no children, though he had always wanted them. She and Jonathan hadn't had children either, she explained. Talking about the weather in Maine, about some politics. Been shopping? He asked, smiling, nodding at the pink and white striped bag she had set beside her chair. Oh, some long underwear, she joked. It's supposed to be a cold winter after all. They talked some more, finishing a bottle of wine, then had one more glass each, though it seemed to her that she drank more than he did. She was getting tipsy. Watch out here, girl. Keep your wits about you. But then she thought about Jonathan and drank down the glass. Near 10 p.m., he looked around the emptying restaurant. He fixed her with his eyes and said, "How about we go outside?" Marisa hesitated. Okay, this is it. She thought to herself, you can leave, or you can go out there with him. She thought of her resolution. She thought of Jonathan. And she said, yes, let's go. Outside, they walked side by side back to the deserted park she had sat in earlier. They came to the same bench, and he nodded at it, and they sat down, Dale close beside her. She felt his presence, the nearness of a strong man, which she hadn't felt for some time now. It was thrilling, comforting, and unsettling all at the same time. They looked at the boat, the main street, just visible through the trees. They sat in silence for a few minutes, huddling against the cold. Dale stretched. His arm went along the back of the bench, not quite around her shoulders, but she could feel his muscles. How strong he was, she reflected. It was then that she glanced down and saw a twisted length of white rope protruding from his pocket, about to fall out. She nodded at it. You're going to lose something, Dale. He glanced down, picked it up, flexed the rope in his fingers, unwound it. Tool of the trade, he said, looking at her querying frown. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. Dale looked back to the main street, just visible through the trees, at the couple, now out of the bedroom and sipping champagne, again on the rear deck. That's him in there, the handsome guy? He asked. Yes, Marisa said. That's my husband. That's Jonathan. She shivered again from the cold and the disgust as she watched him kiss the petite blonde. She started to ask Dale if he was going to do it tonight, to murder her husband, but then decided that he, probably like most professional killers, would prefer to speak in euphemisms. So she asked simply, when is it going to happen? They were now walking slowly away from the wharf. He had seen what he needed to. When? Dale asked. Well, that depends. That woman in there with him? Who's she? Oh, one of his little slut nurses. I don't know, Karen maybe? She's spending the night with him? Oh, no. I've been spying on him for a month. He'll kick her out about midnight. He can't stand clinging mistresses. And, well, there'll be another one tomorrow, but not before noon. Dale nodded. Then I'll do it tonight, after she leaves. He glanced at Marisa. I'll handle it like I was telling you. After he's asleep, I'll get on board, tie him up, and take the boat out a few miles. Then I'll make it look like he got tangled in the anchor line and went overboard. Tell me something, has he been drinking much? Is there water in the ocean? She asked sarcastically. Good. That'll help. Then I'll drive the boat close to Huntington and take a raft back in. Just let it drift, he said, nodding at the main street. Do you always make it look like an accident? Marisa asked, wondering if a question like this was breaking some kind of hitman protocol. Well, as often as I can. That job I did tonight I mentioned, it was taking care of a woman in Yarmouth. She had been abusing her own kids. I mean, beating them up. Pests, she called them. Disgusting. She wouldn't stop, but the husband couldn't get the children to say anything to the police. They didn't want to get her in trouble. Oh God, how terrible. Dale nodded. I'll say. So the husband had me. I made it look like that rapist from Upper Falls broke in and killed her. Marisa considered this. Then she asked, Did you? You were pretending to be a rapist? Oh God, no, Dale said, frowning. I'd never do that. I just made it look like I did. Believe me, it was pretty gross, finding a used condom from behind the massage parlor on Knightsbridge Street. So hitmen have standards, she reflected. At least some of them do. She looked him over. Aren't you worried I'm a policewoman or something? Trying to set you up? I just got your name out of that magazine, Worldwide Soldier. Ma'am, you do this long enough, you get a feel for who are real customers and who aren't. Anyway, I spent the last week checking you out. You're legit. If a woman paying someone $25,000 to kill her own husband can be called legitimate. And speaking of which, she took a thick envelope out of her pocket, handed it to Dale. It disappeared into the pocket with the white rope. Dale, wait, your name's not really Dale, is it? No, but it's the one I'm using for this job. Okay, well, Dale, he won't feel anything, she asked. No pain, right? Not a thing, ma'am. Even if he were conscious, that water's so cold, he'll probably pass out and die of shock before he drowns. They had reached the end of the park. Dale asked, You're sure about doing this, ma'am? And Marisa asked herself, Am I sure about wanting Jonathan dead? Jonathan, the man who tells me if he goes fishing with the boys every weekend, but in truth takes his nurses out on the boat for his little trysts, who spends our savings on them, who announced a few years after getting married that he had had a vasectomy and didn't want the children he'd promised we'd have, who speaks to me like a 10-year-old about his job or current events, never even hearing me say, I understand, honey, I'm a smart woman, who nagged me into quitting a job I loved, who flies into a rage every time I want to go back to work, who complains whenever I wear sexy clothes in public, but who stopped sleeping with me years ago, who gets violent whenever I bring up divorce because a doctor at a teaching hospital needs a wife to get ahead, and because he's a sick control freak. Marisa Cooper suddenly pictured the shattered corpse of a rattlesnake, lying bloody on a hot patch of yellow Texas sand so many years ago. That's too bad, grandfather. I want him to go to hell. I'm sure, she said to Dale. Dale shook her hand and said, I'll take care of things from here. Go home. You should now practice playing the grieving widow. I can handle that, Marisa said. I've been a grieving wife for years. Pulling her coat collar up high, she returned to the parking lot, not looking back at either her husband or at the man who was about to kill him. She climbed into her Toyota and fired up the engine, found some rock and roll on the radio, turned the volume up high, and left Green Harbor. She cranked the windows down, filling the car with sharp autumn air, rich with the scent of wood smoke and old leaves. and drove fast through the night, thinking about her future, thinking about her life without Jonathan.